Okay, just let me know once the light is green and we'll call the meeting to order.
Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and call this month's BPAC meeting to order. Ms. Gloriosa Mas, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Member Abo,
Here.
Member Angela Bird-Gray, Member Yolanda Eisenstein,
Here.
Member Judith Gabriel,
Here.
Member Tony Gerlix. He said that he's attending via Zoom.
Do we know if he is in the Zoom waiting room?
Mr. Chair, I don't see him in the Zoom waiting room.
Okay, if we can just keep an eye out for him, just given that he said he would attend tonight's meeting virtually. That way we let him in, and then if you wouldn't mind when he does pop in, if he does, just give us a heads up.
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much.
Member Dan Painter, excused. Member Steve Pilcher,
Here.
Member Ben Pengilly, excused. Member Carl Spencer,
Present.
Chair Michael Garcia.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our January 11th, 2024 meeting. Are there any changes from staff?
Mr. Chair, it's the agenda first.
Oh, sorry, approval of the agenda. I've already skipped it over. So any changes from staff for tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Staff is requesting to remove item 7.D, discussion and placement of bike lanes on streets with parking. Member Dan Painter cannot make this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other changes?
Oh, sorry, the subcommittee communications as well, 8.C.
Okay. Any changes from members? And if not, what's the will of the committee?
Move to approve the agenda as modified.
And I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Gloriosa Mas, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Member Abo,
Yes.
Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Gabriel,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Member Spencer,
Yes.
Chair Garcia,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Now we're on to the approval of the minutes of our January 11th, 2024 meeting. Any changes from staff?
None, Mr. Chair.
How about any changes from members?
Mr. Chair, I wonder if it is possible and appropriate to include the YouTube link to that meeting at the top of the minutes. I think we did that for the previous one on amendment. And I'm not sure how difficult it is to find that. I didn't find that. But if we could add that to that before it's approved and posted, I think it'd be convenient for the citizens. Thanks.
Is that a doable?
Yes, Mr. Chair, my problem last time is I cannot watch or search any YouTube in this laptop because this was issued by the city. And, and so I was searching for YouTube and I could not find it. I could not find that specific, maybe.
I got you covered. Well, how about I'll send the link to y'all and then we include it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Good old firewalls.
Yes.
Okay, any other changes or recommended changes from members? Okay, hearing none, what's the will of the body?
Move to approve, including the link proposed by Mr. Obo.
Okay. Second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Gloriosa Mas, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Abo,
Yes.
Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Gabriel,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Member Spencer,
Yes.
Chair Garcia,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, next up is communications from the public. Do we have any individuals from the public that would like to address the body today? Okay, sure. Just step up to the podium, make sure to push the button and it turns green, and I'll go ahead and give you 2 minutes to address the body. And pull it down just because we want to
Okay.
make sure
Is that
that,
better?
yeah, perfect.
This is my first meeting. I'm a volunteer river steward with the Santa Fe Watershed Association. And I take care of the section of the river trail between Frenchie's Field and Seiler Bridge. And I'm just here to learn more, but also just to voice a little bit of concern about safety in that section. The bikes tend to go really, really fast. Partly because there's a nice little slope, and just wanting to put it out there that I'm just wondering what you all are doing in terms of safety on the bike path, and then what we as citizens and people that use the trail often, and not just that section, but the whole section of the river trail, how we can make it safer for everybody. Thanks.
And can we get your name just for the record?
Oh yeah, Lisa Farrand.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. Typically, we don't have a back and forth dialogue during this portion, but happy to entertain if any members would want to express. If not, we can definitely throughout the meeting. If not, at the end during the comments from the chair, happy to address your comments in regards to kind of what's being done in regards to safety measures on not only the river trail, but trails throughout the community.
Yeah, and what the future plans are, because that section is getting busier, and once the section from there to San Isidro Crossing gets completed, it'll be even busier.
Thank you, Ms. Farron. Really appreciate the feedback. I'll open it up to any members just as it was addressed to us. I know we typically don't do that, but sure, I'll go left to right. Member Gabriel, and then Member Pilcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Promotion, Education, and Programming Subcommittee has discussed a public education campaign around both driver and cyclist awareness and education. And we also talked about this in the context of passing the e-bike ordinance. So we intend to do that in the near future.
Thank you, Member Gabriel. Member Pilcher.
I was just going to comment, I've ridden multi-use trails in other communities that have posted 15-mile-an-hour speed limits. I don't think we post any speed limit for our trails here in Santa Fe. So that's something to consider potentially.
Any other members? Member Spencer.
I think we did bring up posting speed limits a year or two ago or sometime in the past. We didn't get a lot of support for posting speed limits on paths because there was no it wasn't clear we had the legal authority to do so or where we would get it. Some communities do post speed limits. I was in Calgary, Alberta for a few weeks one summer, and all of their paths, multi-use paths, were posted with speed limits appropriate for the specific path location, depending on lines of sight, width, density. So I know it can be done if the city attorney and the city government finds a way to implement that. The other thing that would be really important is to make sure that the paths have sufficient width and sufficient lines of sight to allow people to work around each other and know when they need to slow down. There are some parts of the extension of the Chamisa Trail where it's at the far south end. I don't even think it's called Chamisa anymore, where there are very, very, very poor lines of sight, and people have to be really, really careful. It's not signed in any way that would encourage care. So if there's a way to at least qualitatively post signs saying, beware of pedestrians, or yield to pedestrians, or ride safely, that might be something we could do right away, even if we didn't have the will of the governing body to insist on posting actual speed limits.
Thank you, Member Spencer.
Thank you.
Member Bo.
Mr. Chair, and a couple things, in a conversation, one of the concerns of having a posted speed limit is, does, is there a mechanism to determine that someone who's going 14 or 16 miles an hour? You know, so the issue really is, if there is some kind of accident, what is the responsibility of the posting entity? I happen to ride the river trail there a lot. I like that, and I'll go out for lunch and ride it. My approach is to use a bell. And I think that you know, oftentimes I'll slow down, I'll use a bell, let people pull their dogs to the same side of the trail and pass. And so there are a lot of people who just blow up and down, as you note, but I really think that what we should focus on is really folks riding responsibly, as much as we can. And a bike bell is like a sound from everybody's youth, and it is actually a very effective tool. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Bo. Any other comments from members? Sure, Member Spencer.
Is this worth a future agenda item, just in terms of anything we could change? I appreciate Mr. Member of O's comment, and that goes to just good behavior, but if there's anything we want to add formally, is it worth a future agenda item?
Can definitely take that up for consideration, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments? Well, thank you again, Ms. Farrand. Really appreciate it. Welcome to the meeting, and definitely invite you to come back as you wish, or given the good old technology nowadays, we're on YouTube and you can watch it live or watch it at your leisure. So thank you again for joining us. Member Pilcher.
Just a quick comment. I don't know if it was done by city crews or not, but sometime last year on the Chamisa Trail, a lot of painted stencil, "Please don't litter" markings appeared on the trail. Again, I don't know if that's done by our Parks Department or that was just an ad hoc action by citizens.
Have to investigate that for you.
I don't see a lot, well, I suppose people walking might litter. I don't think most bicyclists are probably eating food and throwing their wrappers over their shoulder.
Well, definitely can get you an answer on that. Any other members of the public that would like to address the body? Is there, given we're live and Zoom, is there anybody with their hand raised potentially for public comment virtually? See anybody?
Mr. Chair, no one on Zoom.
Thank you so much. With that, let's go ahead and close that agenda item, and we'll go ahead and move on to communications from other agencies. First up is Santa Fe MPO. Mr. Ani, floor is yours.
For the record, Eric Ani with the Santa Fe MPO. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good evening. It's good to see you. And Mr. Chair, congratulations on being back for a few more years. Consistency is an excellent thing to have with this committee. So, and congratulations on getting your resolution introduced. Anything we can do to support that? So just a couple brief updates. I'm monitoring a national Senate bill 3670 introduced by our own Senator Heinrich, requiring states to establish a complete streets program. Not only that, but the bill goes further to request an allotment of funds for complete streets. Now, I know this is in the beginning stages of any particular Senate bill. The good news is that Heinrich's been listening to local folk in New Mexico and is trying to take it to the next level. Locally here in New Mexico, House Bill 146 is again coming up to try to create a transportation trust fund for transportation issues that can widen the funding gap for NMDOT and such good projects. We'll keep an eye on that. Over the last, since at least I've presented to you, there's been a few updates in terms of the 60% design stage of Cerrillos Road, where city staff, MPO staff, and have been working diligently with the design team the other end of NMDOT to improve pedestrian safety with those designs. There were some breakthroughs just in the last couple of weeks, albeit a little bit tenuous in terms of the back and forth on that project regarding maybe tighter radii at intersections to increase pedestrian safety, consideration for pedestrian hybrid beacons at mid-block crossings, and then a redesign of the Cordova intersection that would basically honor what would be a road diet in Cordova. Good stuff. The moving forward to the St. Francis interchange project that this group has been very involved with. As a result of a memorandum that was submitted on behalf of the MPO and the city, there was a back and forth meetings regarding those requests. I chose not to attend what was a on-site visit of San Mateo intersection and the new proposed intersections on St. Mike and the redesign of Galisteo intersection. The traffic engineer and my staff met with the design team and came away with some options that we can provide for you in more detail on your request. Good news on a new project. If you can picture St. Francis at Zia and Sawmill in 2010, the NMDOT concluded its St. Francis corridor study. In that corridor study, articulated the need for side paths along St. Francis to accommodate pedestrian safety. As a result of leadership from our community, specifically a young woman named Bright Daystar, who is 88 years old and came to me directly, having lived in the neighborhood for somewhat a couple of decades, insistent that she be able to walk to Albertsons without much ado. After meeting with her and some constituents in their neighborhood, we have met with District 5, NMDOT, and the Planning Bureau's HSIP director to look at federal funding for said project. This morning I did what I call a pop-in meeting where I just showed up unannounced to District 5, because sometimes it's hard to get a hold of people. And I was actually met with warm reception from our district engineers with a commitment to actually do a project, albeit, of course, these projects take time. And I had a candid conversation with Ms. Bright Daystar that, yes, being 88 years old, she may well be in her 90s, and we hope she is, to see this project to fruition. I give her all the credit for her passion and willingness to stand up. She can't be here tonight, and she wanted to address you directly as to the need and the importance. So I said I would just speak to her. Next Tuesday, we're meeting with design staff or consulting staff. The MPO now resides at Roybal Center on 737 Road. In front of that center, you may be familiar with, is an old tennis court / basketball court that is no longer being used. We got permission from the city to create and paint and design a traffic garden, which is basically a bicycle playground. So we'll be meeting with design consultants Tuesday morning to look at design options. If anybody's interested and wants to join in, it will be lots of fun. I want to give a shout out to Ramella. I would submit to you that her project management skills are nothing less than wizardry in a good way. I sat in a meeting a couple weeks ago with Ramella and the NWT and a Hail Mary pass to save the underpass. It is in peril, and probably for good reason. The ultimate cost now is up to 50. What was anticipated 8 years ago as a $4 million project. Thanks to the leadership from Ramella and quick thinking, there are options to keep it alive, albeit it will be a challenge for the city. Not underscore, if you think about that underpass not in terms of, in terms of challenges of homelessness and other things that come up that may shed sort of a contrary light. Is the knowing that when that project gets done, and has been committed from this community for the last 8 years, that for generations, that rail trail isn't going anywhere, and it will be a commuter, continue to be main commuter and recreation. I hope we cannot lose sight of that, even though, yes, the bill is getting higher, but in the long term, I believe the payoff. Those are just a few updates. There's always lots going on. Those things.
Thank you, Mr. Ani. Appreciate the updates. Members? Member Spencer.
Thank you. First question, I looked at House Bill, I think it was 146 after it was flagged to me by ABQ, and I didn't see anything specific in there that would require any monies to be spent on bicycle or pedestrian projects. Is it your sense that that's a deliberate omission, or is there a thought, can we expect that we would get some of that money for projects that don't just go to cars?
Excellent question, and I did follow up with NMDOT staff to get clarification just a few hours ago. This, if successful, would go into the state road fund. Is that accurate? State road fund. The state road fund then is used to inform and fund projects throughout the entire state. There is no commitment that they would be fed by, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that kind of awkwardness about it, is that it theoretically could be used for a continuation of what would be, I would submit to you, as a capacity building. It is what it is.
Yeah, that was my concern. I was a little surprised to see that advocacy organization asking for people to support it, when to me it seemed like there wasn't really a deal that we could count on. The other question is, why did the underpass get so expensive? Is it just inflation or changes in design, or that seems to be making it tougher to justify that?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I know Ramella can speak more eloquently to this, but what I do know from sitting in meetings with Ramella, there are contributing factors. Number one would be, as the Rail Bureau has been involved, there has been additional design and construction requirements that go beyond what was the scope of that trail to a much longer creature to accommodate the relative distance between the tracks and that new trail system. That is an additional cost of somewhat in the realm of $3.2 million, I believe.
There's a significant improvements that needs to be done on the rail trail. The $5 million funding for the underpass is just the underpass. But when you shift the rail trail from being on the surface to go underground, or underpass, you need to connect the rail trail to the underpass, and the engineers who studied the underpass and put a $5 million construction funding, design and construction funding, did not realize that they need to do a lot of improvements on the rail.
Is that a result of the geotech work that was done this last year?
No, the geotech was drilling was a result of the 30% review with NMDOT. So when we reviewed the plans, the Rio Metro was there, and they said that there is nothing can happen with that project without involving Rio Metro. So the design has changed a lot from the conceptual design that was done in 2018.
Okay. Oh dear. Well, thank you.
There's retaining wall needs to be constructed to separate the rail trail from
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I forgot something if I may.
Yeah, go right ahead.
This is kind of cool news. So the city has been contemplating a Sakio Trail extension called what I call the Ottawee Crossing near Ottawee Street. Some of you may be familiar with that project. A lot has gone down in 2023 to accelerate that in terms of the potential of crossing Maze Street, including our friends HomeWise who purchased the home and will be providing an easement for people to cross through Maze. Secondly, thanks to the work again from Ramella and HomeWise to some extent, we were able to get through the P&M property onto Maze, an easement agreement. With that said, we're going to be, MPO put together a very specific survey, online survey, and our friend here, Mr. Bill Alien, is going to help put these posters up to get strategic input about the potential use and interest in that trail. This survey is going to help Ramella inform an application for transportation alternative program funds. And then hopefully that funding will be accepted and we can actually have another section of the Sakio Trail to put a flag in. Really excited about it.
Thank you, Mr. Ronnie. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Keep up the great work, Eric. Next up, updates from Santa Fe Conservation Trust. Mr. Tim, excuse me, Mr. Tim Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As we're still early in the year, we haven't really started a lot of our regular work for the city in terms of trail maintenance. I have scheduled about half of our Passport to Trail field trips that we'll be doing this spring to Dale Ball Trails and Santa Fe Canyon Preserve. We have handed Safe Routes to School over to Santa Fe Public Schools, who has posted a job position for the Safe Routes to School coordinator full-time. And so that's underway. So Safe Routes to School is a little bit on hold. There are some groups walking to school already, but a lot are waiting for better weather anyway. So that's and one more thing is some of you may recall that we have a community trail planning collaborative called Gusto, which kind of was put on hold for a little while, although we were pursuing Gusto priorities. And now that we've passed Safe Routes to School off to SFPS, I'm going to really be focusing on planning and building natural surface trails to make connections under Gusto. I wanted to talk to you all about some design issues quickly. And as you know, I've been working in New Mexico and in Santa Fe for actually 20 years now doing bike and pedestrian design. And I've been to a lot of BTAC and BPAC meetings. I used to be on the technical review subcommittee. I used to be on the on-road subcommittee. I'm not on either, but I appreciate that the city is still interested in having me present at design review meetings where I provide some critical perspective and sometimes, more critical than perhaps people want to hear. But, I really am concerned about, following design guidelines, following planning guidelines. And so really, when I wrote the Bike Master Plan over 10 years ago with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we envisioned a bikeway system focused on multi-use trails and roads that accommodate bikes. There are situations where trails may be put along roads to fill in gaps. And Eric Ani just pointed out one, St. Francis Drive, is an opportunity to create what's called a side path. And in that case, the side path, it'll be an extension of the St. Francis Trail. It'll link one signal to another. It won't have any driveway crossings. It won't have any street crossings. Hopefully, it will connect to Albertsons instead of people having to go to Zia and come back. But it doesn't present any hazards or conflicts to bicyclists who use it. Bicyclists can use sidewalks. It's legal. Often it's desirable. But bicyclists need to know that sidewalks come with conflicts, that you're not visible, you're not easily anticipated by motor vehicles. This is why the League of American Bicyclists and AASHTO agree that the best accommodations for bicyclists are bike lanes and along roads. And that can include protected bike lanes, but using the sidewalk or creating a side path, a two-way side path is another step. And just making a sidewalk wider and putting up a bike route sign does not solve the issue of conflicts. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because, you know, lately, the majority of our road projects that are coming forward are, on one hand, they're including bike lanes, which is good. A problem in the past was people were proposing side paths instead of bike lanes, which was really a major problem that we took care of with the Bike Master Plan, as well as working with the county, which was proposing paths instead of lanes. Recently, the majority of our projects are coming forward with side paths being proposed. And in some cases, the St. Francis, St. Michael's interchange, the proposal that Eric is mentioning, they're justifiable because they're making connections with trails. They're not creating new conflicts. The St. Francis Trail actually connects to a grade-separated crossing to the rail trail. So it has some real value and does not introduce any new conflicts except just using signalized crosswalks. There's others that have come forward. Richards Avenue, the Arroyo Chimizo crossing. When it first I heard, it already had a side path designed along it. I'm not sure where the idea came from. I don't think a lot of analysis was done about what kind of connectivity are we creating, what kind of conflicts are we creating. In the end, I think it's okay. I think there was not enough emphasis on connecting to the Arroyo Chimizo Trail, but it's taken care of. You know, it's not as slam dunk as the St. Francis Trail, but it's acceptable, I would say. And it has, of course, bike lanes. Another one that has come forward that does not have a side path, I have advocated for a side path, was Henry Lynch Road, because Henry Lynch Road is going to connect directly to the river trail within a year. And it will connect someday to the Acequia Trail, should the city build the Acequia Trail. I think a lot of people don't believe the Acequia Trail will ever be there. But the analysis is simple. You can connect the river trail to the Acequia Trail across one very little used street, 2 driveways, and Agua Fria Street, which will have a crosswalk. To me, it's a no-brainer. Why settle for a sidewalk when you can have a side path that will also accommodate bicyclists in addition to the bike lanes? But for some reason, that idea has not gotten traction. One last example I want to bring up is Bishop's Lodge Road. And Bishop's Lodge Road, first I saw of any design, it had a side path along it. Well, you know, that's a really different animal. I guess you could say there's side paths that work in subdivisions that design for it, that have access control. So if you go to El Dorado, there's long paths, no driveways, no cross streets. Las Soleras, same thing, you know, long paths between major intersections, no extra conflicts. Bishop's Lodge Road is a 2-mile segment being designed with a side path that has 40 crossings of driveways and intersections. There's specific guidelines in AASHTO that I'm going to share with you. I didn't want to hand out something and have you reading it. I'll hand it out to you. I created a grid. This is something I wanted to give you all last month, but it's still just as relevant anytime. But I created a grid looking at some existing side paths and these side path proposals and looking at the AASHTO guidelines, both for planning, what makes a good side path candidate, and design. How do you deal with these extra conflicts that you may be creating by building a side path along a road? And basically, you know, of all the candidates that I included in the table that I'll share with you, you know, Bishop's Lodge Road is by far the least acceptable. And You know, there's nothing, the consultants are going to consolidate a couple roads that are little frontage roads. They're going to be consolidated. So they're going to eliminate about 2 out of 40 of those conflict points. Really, you know, we can make it a wide sidewalk. Another issue is we can't get separation off of the road because City Parks does not want to maintain any margins between sidewalks and streets or paths and streets. I hope that the maintenance funding bill can change City Parks' attitude, because we are systematically getting inferior sidewalks and, in these cases, inferior side paths if they're built, because they're right on the back of the curb. They're right next to the road. In fact, for this Bishop's Lodge design, it's a rollover curb. It's not even a vertical curb. I can't believe it. There's really, when I asked the consultants, why are we building a path? They said, because we were asked to. I want to hear a justification of why Bishop's Lodge Road is a good candidate for a side path, and what are they going to do to make these 40 crossings safe for bicycles. It's actually, we've given them a lot of input on how to make crossings a little safer. They're actually going to make the corners tighter, which is a major breakthrough. They're recognizing the curb radius can be reduced when you have a bike lane or any shoulder. You don't have to make a big wide curb. And so that actually was a major win. But it's a losing battle to try to make 40 driveway and street crossings safe for two-way bicycle traffic off of a street that has no access control. There's no median. So really, I just want people to not be surprised that, you know, at the 90%, I'm going to suggest that, you know, we not call this a bike facility. It can be a big wide sidewalk. That's fine. But, you know, the city cannot show that it has chosen a valid candidate for a side path, or that it can do anything to make two-way bicycle riding safe on this path. So it's, you know, going to be a very simple request. Don't put up a sign that says bike route. Just leave it as a sidewalk. And I know that there's pressure, as there was with Richards Avenue. We said we were going to build a trail. We're going to build a trail. Well, you know, these are not real trails. These are side paths along roads. People are not going to say, oh, let's go ride that side path. They're not going to be perceived as part of the trail system, to be honest. There could have been more done to try to justify it. It could have been designed to be connected to Fort Marcy Park, to an Arroyo Trail into Fort Marcy Park, but there's no planning background like that at all. They said we were asked to build a side path, and so it ended at that. So, you know, this is something that really concerns me. I'm not trying to shut down innovation. Side paths are not innovation. I've been dealing with this for 20 years when I worked for NMDOT.
Mr. Rogers, you got to be respectful of the other folks that got to give updates, and we've got a packed agenda still ahead. So if you wouldn't mind wrapping up the comments, please.
That's it. I really appreciate it. I'll hand out, this is something that, you know, is kind of dense reading, this table. So I invite you all to check it out in the future. And I appreciate your time and patience.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Any questions for Santa Fe Conservation Trust? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Tim, for sharing the resources and information. Up next is Bike Santa Fe. Ms. Weber. Oh, forgot we got to change that on the agenda for us next time.
It'll be alternating every meeting.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. First, we'd like to thank BPAC for its letter of support for our Community Spark grant that we submitted. We'll let you know the outcome of the application. We expect to hear from the League of American Cyclists in March. It's been a minute since we've given an update. So since our last address to BPAC in December, Bike Santa Fe has worked on the following. We've formed several committees now that meet on a regular basis, including the Advocacy Committee, the Events Committee, the Communications Committee, Education, Membership Committee, and the Finance Administration Committee. Anyone who is interested or would like to be involved with us can sign up for any of these committees at any time. Details about committees are available on our website at bikesantafe.org. In December, we met with Department of Public Works Director Regina Wheeler to discuss a variety of issues. that face cyclists and pedestrians, including the topic of specific bike paths and lane maintenance issues that were brought to us by our members, mostly concerning overgrown vegetation, lack of clearing, general maintenance issues. We wanted to discuss also the lack of responsiveness from the CRM reporting system that people are supposed to use to report maintenance issues on. We wanted to talk with her about a recently constructed buffered bike lane that was not adequately marked or painted, and then also the ongoing issue of obtaining funds and then budgeting for the construction of future infrastructure and maintenance of current infrastructure. Out of this meeting, Director Wheeler instructed Bike Santa Fe to gather information on which intersections or routes cyclists in Santa Fe would find most helpful to focus bike and pedestrian-centered improvements on. We obtained this information during our first member survey, which leads to the next bullet point. Bike Santa Fe conducted a survey in January asking the more than 900 people on our email list about themselves and their bikes, what they think about Santa Fe as a bikeable city, and what they expect from Bike Santa Fe as an organization. We received more than 100 responses. Highlights include the following. More than half of respondents are members of other bicycle organizations, which include Fat Tire Society, Seniors on Bikes, Santa Fe Road Riders, and the League of American Cyclists. Most people have a mountain bike, that was 66%. 50% have a road bike, and 25% who responded have an e-bike. As for what they want Bike Santa Fe to do, 80% want to represent cyclists at public meetings. 47% want us to share information and updates about cycling in Santa Fe, and 33% want us to organize advocacy campaigns, which is great because we're doing all three of those things right now. What cyclists in Santa Fe want includes on-street bike lanes, particularly fully protected bike lanes at 66%, complete streets that are safe and accessible at 52%, off-road bike paths and trails at 37%, and road and traffic signal maintenance at 32%. As for the results regarding which intersection or route would be most desirable to rehab for cyclists, broadly included most intersections on Cerrillos south of St. Michael's. Some particular highlights include Caminos Carlos del Rey in Cerrillos, Osage in Cerrillos, Calle del Cielo, and then also specifically at St. Francis and Alameda, where the river trail crosses St. Francis. Bike Santa Fe also organized a winter social at Knuckles Brewing on January 28th, where we shared updates about our organization. We shared the survey results. We held raffles and had interactive discussions about bike infrastructure with our members. More than 70 people were in attendance. Additionally, this has been brought up already, Bike Santa Fe, along with other New Mexico bike advocacy organizations, issued a statement of support for Senator Heinrich's Complete Streets Act, which starting in 2027 would create a grant program that cities could apply to for funds to support complete street infrastructure. Bike Santa Fe has also issued a letter of support for Council Member Garcia's bicycle and pedestrian facilities and maintenance resolution, as well as expressing support at the latest governing body meeting and at the Mayor's Committee on Disability. We'll continue to organize support for this resolution and support it as an item on your agenda today. A specific issue that's recently been brought up that we would like to discuss, I think it might have been on the agenda, but at this point it might have been stricken, concerning new road construction on Paseo del Sol. We think this new construction and the width of Paseo del Sol would provide an excellent opportunity to install a fully protected or separated bike lane from car traffic and parking. Not that is solely being traffic or parking protected. This is an area of town that is growing rapidly and does not currently have much needed bikeability. As Santa Fe grows and new construction occurs, we're given ample opportunities to right the wrongs of previous traffic design in Santa Fe and create a city that's more friendly to all road users than the city that existed before it. And it would really be a shame to squander these opportunities as they come to us. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you for those updates. And any questions from members? Member Spencer.
I was wondering if we can get a copy of your report
Yes.
by email.
Email
and
that to
send
you.
it to
Yep.
Romella. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you for the report. Appreciate it. Sorry, I couldn't make the Knuckles meetup. I was kind of bummed. I was out of town. My daughter plays club volleyball and I was in El Paso. So it was one of those that is a bit tough to get here on that Sunday when I didn't leave El Paso till like 4 o'clock, I think, that day. But please let us know the next time there is those type of activities or anything else BPAC can support you all that you're doing. So, okay. And I guess follow-up, everything went well with the submission for the application? Okay, good, good. Any other questions? Okay, last up, Public Safety Committee member Spencer.
Thank you. We did not have a real meeting as we did not have a quorum. Just a couple of things. Amanda Chavez took over as the chair of that committee as of the first of the year, so she's our new chair. We didn't do any business because we didn't have a quorum. We did get a fourth quarter proactive operations presentation from the police department. The one thing that might be relevant to this committee would be the traffic enforcement, the focused traffic operation. That was primarily at Cerrillos Road, St. Francis Drive, Airport Road, and Camino Carlos Rey. And it was specifically targeting areas with high vehicle crashes. I only have a hard copy there. If folks are interested, I could ask to get a PDF or a PowerPoint from the police and disseminate it to this committee. But that was the most relevant. There was a second after action report on clearing some of the unhoused problems that sometimes crop up along our bicycle trails. There weren't any huge issues with that. And then there was a youth gun violence operation. It was probably the third most important one to try to cut down on some of the incidents we've seen. But as I said, I have a hard copy, but that we weren't given a full packet. But I can get that.
Spencer.
Any questions? But that's it.
Any members with questions? Member Spencer on his report. Okay, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to move on to item 7A, consideration of resolution yet to be numbered, sponsored by myself, calling on the city manager to designate appropriate entities and departments within the city to ensure safe and accessible use of bicycle and pedestrian facilities by establishing a regular inspection schedule for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and maintaining a geographic information system inventory for recording the physical condition of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and calling on the mayor to include the ongoing maintenance of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in his proposed annual budget. And so I know Ramella is tabbed as the staff for this, but I think ultimately this is your work. And so part of the process of it going through the committee schedule, I wanted to make sure you all saw the final product, had any feedback, any proposed changes. I'm always happy to entertain that in the sense of, or in the form of an amendment. But just starting off, I want to thank you all for your hard work on this. This was definitely one of the labors of love of the committee. And I think it was Member Gerlitz who spoke at public comment during the last governing body meeting that this was 2 years in the making. I mean, it wasn't just that this resolution popped out of nowhere. The committee has been working on this for a long time. And so we're finally here. And so with that, I'm happy to open it up for discussion to the body. I know you all are very familiar with this, and just want to open it up to any of the members for discussion, comments, debates, etc. Member Gabriel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was unable to attend the meeting, and I was wondering if there was general support for the resolution, and how likely is it that we will actually get the funding required to maintain and carry through the resolution?
Sure. Great question. So as noted, this has been, there's letters of support from the Mayor's Committee on Accessibility and Disability. We've got Bike Santa Fe. Thank you so much with support. with Mr. Young show up. We had Member Gerlitz show up. We had members of city staff show up and voice support. Other members of the community during the public comment, because when we introduce the resolution, there's really no feedback. It's just me introducing it. So folks showed up before the introduction and spoke from comments from, or petitions from the floor. And so I think I've gotten lots of support, lots of feedback for this. So I think there is a great amount of support of this for this resolution. Now, I guess the meat of your question is the funding. My hopes are yes. And I think ultimately it comes down to the budget creation by the mayor. What I will commit to is that if we don't get what we're requesting, should this pass, and I do want to set context in regards to, this is a resolution, so this just voices the will of the governing body, so to speak, saying this is what we would like to see. And so should this pass, definitely we'll be working with the mayor to ensure that it's in the budget. If it's not, then I'll work with my colleagues to ensure it's in the budget. So definitely courses of action to take. This is the first committee that it's being heard by. Yesterday it was scheduled to be heard by the Mayor's Committee on Disability, and unfortunately due to some technical issues, I postponed it being heard until the next meeting. That way the committee and all the documents accessible to them. That way they can discuss and debate and provide any additional feedback. There was some additional feedback from them, or initial feedback regarding some incorporation of language into the whereas section that we had in some of the initial first drafts of the legislation that didn't make it to this version. And so anticipate that being an amendment that will be introduced by myself. And so that is where this body has the opportunity to review it, make any potential changes. As long as we're not changing the caption, so to speak, we'll keep it on schedule. But if there are changes that we ultimately reflect a change in the caption, so the caption is the title that we see here on the agenda, then we're good to go. I know in the proposed review schedule, it's scheduled to be heard by the governing body on February 28th. But due to the challenges with the Mayor's Committee on Disability, it's going to be pushed to the first meeting in March because, like I said, I wanted to ensure that they had ample opportunity to provide their input. Now, I can't speak for the other two committees besides that it's going to go to the Public Works and Utilities Committee, as well as the Finance Committee. I thought I had scheduled it for quality of life as well. I'm going to have to check in with city staff because this is definitely a quality of life matter, which just means during Public Works and Utilities, I can refer it to the respective committee, but don't think it's going to necessarily throw off a timetable given we know it's going to be delayed one council meeting anyway. So long answer to your question, sorry.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it passes, are we looking at and there is funding allocated, are we looking at July 1st of 2025? But
This budget that starts
July
Yep.
24th, July 1st,
1st,
2024.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, that we at least would have the funding allocated to begin the work. Member Spencer.
Risk of jumping ahead, given that we're talking about bicycle and pedestrian improvements. I don't want to throw a bomb into this resolution, but if there's any chance of working in the idea of the changes to sidewalk improvements, because that certainly is a pedestrian issue, and it goes to returning pedestrian facilities such as sidewalks into their original condition. And that would seem to fall well within this, although it may complicate the ask in terms of money. But I don't think I want to torpedo this, but is it worth a discussion as to what aspects of Mr. Abo's proposal, which I fully support, could be worked into this without getting pushback from the governing body?
Great question. And so I'm just referring back to the title, right? Because that's the box we're kind of in right now. That the way I look at the legislation is the title is the box. If you change the parameters of the box, it changes the process. And through the title, it says ensure safe and accessible use of bicycle and pedestrian facilities. I would consider a sidewalk a pedestrian facility. Later on in the resolution, it calling on the mayor to include ongoing maintenance of bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in the proposed annual budget. I would consider a sidewalk pedestrian infrastructure. So, you know, there's in conversation I've had with folks in regards to, you know, could resources through this potential allocation be utilized to support a campaign for making sure the public is aware of the law that requires residents to clear sidewalks of snow and ice in a timely manner. I think it, again, is the maintenance of the pedestrian infrastructure. So I think it can be interpreted as yes. And so ultimately, again, long answer to a short question, yes.
I think it may take a while, but it may be, and this may be the general resolution, but to look further into, in order to implement this for more than snow and ice, but, you know, say cracking and sidewalks that are falling in total disrepair, to work in meaningful discussion of how we might fund those improvements or those maintenances without putting the full burden on people who may not be able to right now pay for it. I know that I talked to my own counselor, Sig Lindell, about this about a year or two ago, and she said, well, there's a possibility of people basically having the city pay for it now and then the city be reimbursed if they sold their home. But that sort of is a long-term issue that still puts the onus on the individual rather than the city to support a city facility, especially in my neighborhood, we have a lot of older folks who are going into assisted living, and that's not cheap. And sometimes their equity is going to go right back into the quality of their lives as they, you know, get farther and farther towards the far shore. But I think we do need to look at this in the long term as a social justice issue.
I completely agree, and that's why we have the Mayor's Committee on Disability as a part of this process.
Right.
Um,
I'm not trying to steal your thunder, Eric.
Well, I think this is a good starting point and foundation that can lead to future initiatives, as we'll be discussing later with Member Abo's topic, because the money proposed through this resolution is a drop in the bucket compared to the resources that are ultimately needed. I'll be frank.
With an old city, deferred maintenance.
And so I think that's where we've got to look at it from the perspective we're starting to begin to allocate some resources. And then with the other asks that this resolution proposes, which is to conduct the assessment. It'll help us get a better picture of what costs are, and that way we at least can ballpark future requests. Because again, there's nothing, we've got to look at it from this perspective. This would begin to set the baseline, not the ceiling, and there's nothing that proposes nothing that limits this administration or future administrations from allocating much more resources than what's being requested here. So
You build the foundation first, not the second floor.
Member Bo and then Member Pilcher.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks, Cal, for bringing that up. I just want to ask a kind of technical question. So the resolution that was prepared is pretty much straightforward as it was drafted by folks and presented to the governing body. The FIR that's attached is a staff estimate of what they think the fiscal impact of adopting this resolution would cost on an initial and ongoing basis. But when the resolution is passed, the FIR kind of goes away into some, if the resolution is passed, that's the only thing that persists. The FIR itself is just a tool that can be used by staff to say, oh, there are all these resolutions. How do we put them in place? Let's get the money to do this. Here's the starting point. They might modify that FIR for the initial request. They might expand it or contract it. And so I see the resolution as Cal was saying, and Chair, as you were saying, as the kind of the concrete that is poured. And the FIR is a guidance document for staff in order to execute that. So I think that and I was gonna and we can address this, and I was actually gonna I would not want the proposal that I have and is an agenda item here to get in the way. I would not want that to get in the way of approval of this very important resolution, because this is a great supporting document. And so maybe we can talk about that subsequently on the next item. But I'm really glad that this has been presented, and I would just fully support it.
Thank you, Member Bo. Member Pilcher.
Yeah, I agree. And I think using the analogy of this being like the foundation, your next agenda item is probably like part of the first floor of that building. I mean, I think it's an additive to what we're doing with this resolution. Doesn't detract. Mr. Chair, I caught one minor word that's missing on the final "be resolved" on the bottom of page 5. I think it's supposed to say the mayor. That says "be resolved." And there's no title in there whatsoever.
Oh, I think it's so on line 11, be it further resolved that the blank directs the city manager.
Yeah.
So,
I
yep.
assume that means the mayor.
Yep. Good catch, Member Pilcher.
This is to prove I actually read that.
So the amendment is add the mayor and subsequent mayors, just as the previous further resolved.
Oh, that's a good point.
Member Pilcher, I'll make sure to get that introduced. Any other comments, questions? Rebo. Oh, yes, member. Ms. Gloria Somas.
And we were doing the FIR. When we talk of pedestrian facilities that the city will maintain, I don't think it includes private sidewalks. Only city-owned sidewalks that we will maintain. So if the BPAC, if the committee supports the whatever motion that Member Abo will recommend pertaining to the maintenance of private sidewalks, it will not affect this resolution. However, I think that specific word, that publicly owned or city-owned pedestrian facilities, city-owned bicycle facilities will be maintained by the city, because there are bicycle facilities that is not owned by the city. So that's I think it's a critical word, because if we include the maintenance of all sidewalks, then we will need more than $2.2 million recurring funding or operating funding to maintain all pedestrian facilities. And what happens with sidewalk maintenance is, if there is a neighbor or a person who complains about the maintenance of a sidewalk, then the city sends an inspector, and the city can give citation to the owner, and we will ask them to repair or to maintain the sidewalk. And if they don't have financial resources to repair the sidewalk, the city will repair the sidewalk but put a lien on the property. And Ms. Diaz can speak more to that because she's the administrative manager for streets.
But before we get over our skis, because it's, once we talk, and just as for the entire body, once we start talking about incorporating language for maintaining all sidewalks, that then goes against law as well. And that's why that wasn't included in here. So, but there, it's, when we talk about pedestrian facilities and we look at it from the perspective of maintenance, you know, and that's why I gave the example of ice and snow removal. The city can proactively make sure residents are aware that they are responsible for clearing snow. That's something that can be done. The city can actually do that through resources allocated through here. Accessibility issues regarding existing infrastructure that can be addressed through here. But allocating, as Ms. Glorioso Mas mentioned, allocating resources to have somebody update their private sidewalk, and that sounds so weird because most folks don't, it's not part of your home plat, right? I think that's always somebody that's the argument. It's not part of what I bought as real estate, right? But the individual that owns that property next to the sidewalk is responsible for it. And that's a big issue that much broader than this committee. Happy to discuss that, but I know that there's been measures at the state level to push those responsibilities down onto the municipalities. Those have been shot down because then you're pushing on, $500 million, if not more, needed just for the city of Santa Fe to cover those costs. So before we kind of get into those changes of seeing if folks want to entertain the changes in this resolution to ensure that the resources being requested through this resolution can be allocated for personal sidewalks in front of their house. That's the very catch-22 question in the sense of what is the purpose, what is the intention, and that is not the overall intention with this. I mean, city, absolutely. And I think there's the work that needs to be done through city-owned sidewalks. And that can eat up the $2 million in one project. I mean, there's much more than 2 million just for city sidewalks. So, but I think, you know, given some of the concerns, even with the recent snowstorms, that's why somebody had asked, can we do that with these resources? And I don't see a challenge that we couldn't, because it's an education campaign. So just wanted to set that context that there is current law. This resolution is not proposing to change law. And if the body would like to go down that path, happy to explore it. But this resolution is solely asking for resources for maintenance of city bicycle facilities and pedestrian facilities, but also creating and ensuring that there is accessibility across all. So
I'm happy with that. I don't want to include anything in this that would get it shot down.
Okay.
Sure. Just wanted to bring that up in terms of the long term.
right, and there is, I mean,
I could be really sarcastic and suggest, okay, if it's my sidewalk, I'll just take it out, plant flowers. That probably wouldn't work either.
well, and I think it's a topic worth discussing. It's just not the topic of this resolution.
Absolutely, I agree.
Any other comments or questions from members? Happy to see if any of the folks here joining us, comments. Yeah, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, as I referred to earlier, I'm wondering if if we get increased funding for maintenance of pedestrian facilities, can that include the weeding of the margin between the sidewalk and the road? Because the lack of funding for that is why City Parks is insisting that we no longer have margins, which is counter to AASHTO and counter to city code. And I'd like to see higher quality facilities. So that would be a nice outcome.
Right. And I think it then the question comes back to ownership. City? Yes, absolutely, because it's city-owned pedestrian facility. Private, I think that's where we can explore it, but it's not specifically provided through this resolution.
Thank you. And that's the issue is with the city projects. Under city code, we're getting private developers to put in margins. That's a given. The city itself for city projects is creating sidewalks that are back of curb that are really not acceptable. So that would be the concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I appreciate that feedback. Anybody else? If not, what's the will of the body?
I move to approve the resolution as presented. Oh, as amended with mayor and subsequent mayors inserted in the second, now therefore.
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? No, member Spencer stepped out, but we can get his vote when he comes back. May I get a roll call vote, please, Ms. Gloria Somas?
Member Abo,
Yes.
Member Eisenstein,
Yes.
Member Gabriel,
Yes.
Member Pilcher,
Yes.
Chair Garcia.
Yes. Oh, okay, well, thank you. I'll make sure to keep everybody updated. My plan was to come back in March to, share the good news that it passed, but, I think we've waited this long, waiting an extra 2 weeks for the Mayor's Committee on Disability to hear it and provide their feedback is well worth it. And we'll make sure, well, actually, it should be scheduled right after the governing body right? The way the timing works out, sometimes this meeting is the day after governing body, sometimes it's the week before. Anywho, we'll make sure to keep everybody informed into updates, et cetera. With that, let's just thank you again, everybody, for the hard work on this. This was all on your shoulders, so thank you. Yes. Oh, so we'll have to so then do we stall for a minute and table it? I don't know if he stepped out for a bio break or to take a call. Let's go to well, no, we can't table because he's part of it, so we've got to wait till call gets back.
Mr. Chair, if we could
Yeah, Member Pilcher.
carry over filibuster from this topic to the next one. I was reading, I saw that article in the newspapers, I think BPAC Santa Fe included in their report to us about these various legal claims the city has paid out to people getting injured on sidewalks. So, and maybe this is more of a legal question, but I read that, I thought, well, how is it that we can make people with the responsibility to keep, sidewalk clean of snow and ice and repair your sidewalk if it gets degraded, yet the city's then liable though if someone gets hurt on the sidewalk? Seems like we're sending mixed messages there. Maybe I don't understand the sidewalk system here. But it seems like in one instance, it's the city's responsibility, and in other instances, it's the adjoining property owner's responsibility. I don't know if that's correct or.
It is in some sense. So the litigation and lawsuits brought forth are on the city-owned facilities, not the sidewalk in front of somebody's residence. So if somebody slipped and fell in front of somebody's residence, that homeowner would be liable for that. So
the distinction between then a city sidewalk and I guess what, a private sidewalk
Mhm.
is
dependent on where it's located,
use or zoning or?
just dependent on where it's
Totally.
located. It can be, I think it just comes down to location ultimately.
How would a private property owner, single family property owner know what category they fall in?
So if it's in front of somebody's house, it's private.
So it's associated with land, use of the land.
Yes, and I think that's a very broad question, so I don't want to oversimplify it in the sense, besides saying it's all dependent on where it's located ultimately. You would have to take it on the case-by-case basis. So, yeah.
Interesting. So someone could actually then, say you're in a residential neighborhood, if you slipped and fell, broke your wrist, you could sue the
Homeowner.
homeowner.
And that's why there's the law to clean it. And I mean, so I think,
Liability should certainly be part of any education campaign.
yeah,
People might be a little bit more, take it a little bit more seriously that, oh, someone gets hurt here, I'm liable.
right.
I'll get out and shovel my sidewalk.
Member Spencer, you held us up from this. We're waiting on your vote.
Apologies.
No, I definitely understand you had to step out for a moment, but
I would have voted yes.
so we're on the vote. Final, there was a motion to approve the resolution with the amendment, adding the language mayor and subsequent mayors to the resolution in the last, be it therefore resolved. So everybody voted. You're up to bat.
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
the resolution passed.
Okay, thank you so much. Next up is item B, discussion on possible changes to sidewalk improvements and maintenance program. Member Abo, this item is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. And as we touched on in the previous item, I tend to see this as a long game. I think that ordinance changes that will put liability on people to pay a fee, even though it might remove liability from an accident or the responsibility to currently maintain. I think it will be a long campaign. Even in the introduction of this last time, one of our members strongly objected to the idea that anybody but someone else should pay for the frontage in front of their house. And I think that, I don't think this is the right time to put this forward. I want to bring this to people's attention that this is a problem that, you know, most of the nation has very similar, and I think they are, wash your hands of the responsibility down to the person who can no longer wash their hands of the responsibility. I think that's the reason that this is kind of the law of the land throughout the land. There are very few jurisdictions that have programs similar to Ithaca or I think there are a couple of jurisdictions, San Diego perhaps. And so I think that to try and propel this at this time is not the right way to achieve the approval of the resolution that we just recommended. But I do want people to keep in mind the idea that there might be a better way than having your elderly neighbors be responsible for sidewalks that were installed when they bought the house 30 years ago. Because I just think that trying to propose adoption of an ordinance like this will bring out folks. They won't come out with their snow shovels, but they'll come out with their pitchforks. And so I just want to make sure that folks are aware of the issue and realize the difficulty. You know, I might ask staff how many liens have been filed and how many miles of sidewalk have been improved, you know, because it's something that's a very difficult thing to do. And Lucretia, if you do have that at top of mind, or Ramella, I think it'd be great to understand, does it currently work? Because I'm imagining it's very difficult to do.
Chair, I'm Member Bo. Currently, right now, liens for sidewalks on property owners, we maybe a handful currently.
So they're in the years that this has been in place. This is a relatively.
They recently just started doing liens. We've been more proactive on it just
Got it.
recently.
Okay. So it is, it's an approach that the city is working on, and maybe there will be some success. I just think right now, I just want to bring this to people's attention because I realize it's broken. And I walk on Pacheco Street all the time, and I have to go from one sidewalk to the other side of the road where there's some dirt, to the other side of the road where there's some driveway, the other side of the road where there's some sidewalk. And so I looked into it and realized that there's not a streamlined system for doing this. So I don't want to get in the way of the resolution. I do want people to consider that there probably is a better way to do this. And maybe the lien thing will work out, but it's kind of tough. You know, you know, Cal's going to get in your way if you go to one of his neighbors, it sounds like. And so I apologize, but that's really all. Thanks.
Member Spence.
Yeah, I don't think we should let this long-term idea get in the way of the resolution either, and I'm glad we passed it pretty much intact with a little bit of a wording change to make sure we included the mayor. Sort of cut two philosophical points. One, if we are going to a world where we're promoting non-motorized transportation, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is needed. And it shouldn't fall on the individual any more than resurfacing my street should fall on the individual. I think these should be public projects if we expect the city to treat them as transportation. And secondly, of course, there's a question of who can afford to pay for it. And I think at minimum, the city should at some point in the future, and that's something we can kick down the road, establish at minimum some sort of an assistance program, an assistance fund. So if a person can't afford it and by the way, my neighbor moved in the sixties, so he said that he's now in a lot of health problems. I have another neighbor who apparently was surviving on a reverse mortgage, so I'm not sure how much equity she's going to even have. I think we, at minimum, should establish some sort of program so people who need help get help. And in the long term, treat sidewalks just like we do roads. These are public transportation. So that's why I completely agree with something like the Ithaca plan and would fully support Eric in promoting this, but it's a long-term plan. It's a real paradigm shift, and I don't think we want to endanger short-term gain with long-term planning. But I think we should go this way.
Member Spencer.
To add a little bit to what Mr. Spencer was saying, there's an empty stocking fund that, you can donate to, and people request the money, and, we help people with their electricity bills and utilities and other things. And so it seems like there would be some way to set up some sort of assistance, as he was saying, that, would be the same sort of thing. Because if these people are liable for sidewalks that are in disrepair, or they're facing a lien on their home. So I think, either some sort of grant system, or, system where people could apply for this fund, the same as the empty stocking fund.
Thank you, Member Eisenstein. Member Pilcher.
I'm just thinking here, is there a way that we could, I assume we go to Public Works to maybe recommend that they take a look at the Ithaca situation and explore the possibility of implementing something like that here in Santa Fe, and maybe give us a report back by the end of the year, and super time constraint. At least begin that dialogue and get the right people thinking about it.
Member Bo.
Mr. Chair, so in the resolution we just passed, there was a chunk of money to do assessment of infrastructure, pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. And I'm imagining that if passed, and once that first year work is done, there will be a clear delineation of how many miles of sidewalk are city-owned and the city is liable for. And I do not know if there will be, as an ancillary result of that work, an inventory of the non-city maintained. I'm imagining people are going to say, here's some sidewalk from here to here. And so from 125 to 129, that's city. From 130 to 160, that's private. I think there might be the benefit of getting some inventory of the non-city maintained infrastructure. So, in the long run, I think one of the things there are a couple of things. The first is there may be some resistance to the resolution we just passed, saying this is going to cost a lot of money for a long time, and so we should not do it. I think by just considering a different funding mechanism for sidewalks might deflate that argument a little. And I think one of the elegant things about the Ithaca plan is the liability still sits on the property owner. It does not transfer just because it's a fee assessed. It does not transfer to the city. So, the city does not gain additional liability because they decide to improve certain sections. So I think this is just a back pocket thing that might be useful during the conversation of the maintenance resolution. Thanks.
Member Pilcher.
I just wanted to add to what Cal brought up earlier about them being kind of common public goods. So I live out in Tierra Contenta, happen to live on a road that ends in a cul-de-sac. So on my side of the street, there's no sidewalks. So I don't have to worry about my sidewalk deteriorating. I get the benefit of using sidewalks of everybody else that are existing in my neighborhood or in the broader neighborhood, which, you know, under the current system, if something goes wrong with them, someone else has to pay for it, not me. So you, in that regard, I'm kind of like a freeloader on the system.
Any other comment or questions on this item? Seeing none, what's the will of the body? Discussion? We don't have to take action. We can take action, but it's up to the body. Seeing no action?
Move to move on.
Okay. All right, seeing no action being proposed, we'll go ahead and move on to item 7C, promotion, education, and programming subcommittee activities. Member Gabriel, the chair is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The activity that we will discuss this evening is improvements to the BPAC web page. We met as a committee and also with the communications director for the city, who asked us to come up with suggestions, and then the city will work on the web page. I presume people have had a chance to review the suggestions that we made, and a couple points are, we need to be able to access the web page easier through the city website. That is not an easy thing to do. We feel like we need to have lots more graphics and pictures of all the different modes of transportation in the city. And we're proposing several different tabs so that the homepage is simplified and really attractive. So I guess I'm just seeking feedback from the rest of the group about what we submitted for their review, and then we will be moving this to the city communications director for her assistance with it. So I'm opening it up for suggestions and feedback.
Okay. Thank you, Member Gabriel. Any comments or feedback?
Is it,
Member Pilcher?
were you thinking of creating like a inbox for BPAC that people would, and then each individual member could then have access to that? Or were you thinking that we'd post individual email addresses?
So we are proposing an About Us tab that would have information about all of us, but we also are proposing a Contact Us tab. And our proposal was to put the BPAC chair information and the chairs of the subcommittees, just to streamline things, but we're open to any and all suggestions.
Well, I like the idea of having just a bucket that everything goes into, and everyone can look at it. For one thing, it means that your personal email doesn't have to go out there, or the city doesn't have to set up a bunch of separate email accounts for all of our committee chairs. So I think I've seen that work in other places I've worked at, so I think that'd be a positive way to approach that.
So you're in agreement about the Contact Us?
Oh, yeah, I just
want to be clear, I
Yeah,
understand.
I
what
agree with context. I think they need to, we don't want to be putting out people's personal information.
Member Pilcher, just for clarification, are you thinking maybe a generic email like bpac@santafenm.gov?
Yep.
And then members have access
Just to that
to
email.
well, and I think that's where we can talk maybe internally, Romella, with staff, because I don't know the authorities. If members, maybe Romella and I would have access to that and we can filter it out, but I think that's a great idea where there is one generic email that filters to the committee, and then based on the allowabilities, if IT would allow for a public member to have an email, access to email, or if we get designated access to that email inbox. So I think maybe that, add that to the list and to clarify. Member Spencer.
Question, if there's contact information and information going back and forth, who owns that? I mean, is that information searchable by IPRA? Was the city going to put it on the city's website so the city's computer has the document of record? We had that question come up with the Transportation Board in Los Alamos. We didn't want our individual computers to be searchable if there was discussion to be had. So we wanted to make sure in that case, the county was the locus of official records.
If there will be a quorum, if 6 members are talking with each other.
Right, and I think ultimately the IPRA thing, there's no avoiding it when you're on a public body like this. So if a member of the public were to say, I want to see Member Spencer's emails, it's got to be related and germane to city work, right? It can't be, I want to see Al's emails.
See my
to-
gun stuff, for example.
Well, if it's related to BPAC, but it's got to be germane to the city work, right? So I think that's where, whether it's your personal email or city, it's still liable for IPRA.
We tried to make sure that we kept as much information on the county side as possible.
Understandable. Yeah,
Well,
Member Gabriel.
Cal, I appreciate that. And one of the things that we tried to do was to be extremely comprehensive on the webpage so people could access information easily. So one of the, well, there's 2 different tabs. One is links to all the BPAC meeting minutes and associated documents. And we do have a question about how far back we should go. And then documents and presentations that any member has presented at another committee or made for BPAC related business. So hopefully by being really transparent and comprehensive in what we are sharing, maybe that would minimize that. I don't know.
Member Gabriel, in regards to how far we go back, we can, I think that's up to the body, but I think a good starting point would be this calendar year, and you build off of that. We have access to everything prior to that, should somebody want to access the meeting minutes from 2015. We've got to do digging, because we've got to keep the record of it. I think we would put ourselves in a position if we, what's the justification of stopping at 2016 versus 2015? And if we just start now, because it's the website redevelopment, we use this year as the starting point and, add language that says, for records prior to 2024, please reach out to city staff. And it covers all the bases. Any other comments or Member Ebo?
Chair and Judith, the bottom link on the page is a bad link. It points to a resolution, not the e-bike ordinance. On the page as it exists? Yeah, on the web page, sorry.
Yeah, we feel like the whole thing requires a major overhaul. Yeah.
Member
Mr.
Pilcher.
Chair, so who would be at the staff level trying to maintain this webpage? I know it's gonna take a fair amount of work to get it up, initially launched the way that like Judith was envisioning, but then there's all ongoing maintenance.
That's a question that we put at the very top under general comments and questions. How often do we update the website and how do we go about it? So that can be part of the conversation with the communications director, unless there is a standard operating procedure already.
Well, if we're talking about putting up meeting minutes, that means every month someone has to go in and put up the meeting minutes and the agenda and you do all. I don't know, are you doing that right now, Romella?
We used Prime Gov to put all our agendas and minutes. For website maintenance, for my section at least, we meet with the website developer, the city's website developer once a month. So when this is up and then the chair of the PEP can meet with that person once a month. Or if you need twice a month, you can just schedule it with her.
What could be done, I'm thinking, is that a link be provided to the Prime Gov page. That way it's always updated and in language be, something to the nature of for BPAC minutes and upcoming agendas, click here, takes you to Prime Gov. You can access prior minutes, upcoming agendas, prior agendas, etc. And maybe posting a calendar for the meeting dates of the year. And that's it. And then all it requires is the maintenance of once a year for the calendar to be updated. And then as members graduate and enter the committee, the maintenance of that. I'm just trying to think, make it as low maintenance as possible for everybody involved, whether it's us or the communications team or the IT team, the wizards that deal with the website. The least the better, because I think that's what's kind of got us into this position with the website now. It requires a lot of upkeep, and the least amount we need to do, the better.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And in these tabs, a lot of the stuff is linked. So the main challenge is to make sure that the links are constantly working and that they are appropriate. And that's the same as linking to organizations, making sure that we're not sending people to bogus links or whatever. So really like the idea of connecting directly to prime.gov.
Member Spencer. Okay. Any other comments, feedback? Member Gabriel, do you think you've got what you need as you work to meet with the communications team?
Yes, and I will modify this and send it back out once we've met and we have a clearer idea of what we're going to do. So I'll be sharing that with the rest of the committee.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Great. It's just discussion. So yeah, I think it was feedback unless you're looking for any action on behalf of the committee. Okay. Hearing none, let's go to move on to item 7E, a presentation on the manual on uniform traffic control devices, 11th edition. Mr. Ani, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I recognize that you've been waiting patiently for this exciting, exhilarant, sort of really, really cool presentation. I want to preface this a little bit. First of all, my first caveat is I am not a practitioner of the MUTCD. Of the 1,114 pages of that document, I have not used it to inform street laws, but I have understood it to be a compelling document that governs the control of our roads. So my presentation to you starts with, I used to be cool, from a bumper sticker I've seen on a pickup truck on Cerritos Road. When I've seen that bumper sticker, I see it as something, as a reflection of a human being's thought of when they used to be cool and somewhat ironic. So I look at the MUTCD and its evolution here. It used to be cool, not so much anymore. So in 1935, and you can see the iterations that have evolved to here we are in 2023, the latest 11th edition. So in increments of time, the MUTCD as we know it today has been updated to be more voluminous in what you see actually on the ground today. And I want to just be clear on what the purpose of an MUTCD is. Is anyone in this room familiar with the document to some extent? Somewhat. How about you guys? We got Tim. Okay, so for those of you who aren't, the origin, I'm going to go of a little bit of an origins. The purpose of the MUTCD is to establish uniform national criteria for the use of traffic control devices. And you can probably picture in your mind everything that's on the street, stripes and so forth, and signage, even above and beyond that. Now the new edition says the needs and expectancy of road users on all streets, highways, pedestrian and bicycle facilities and site roadways open to public travel. Okay. So I want to start with a little prop for Buttigieg and his, support of this long-standing update. And I want to reflect on this comment here. In addition, the statutory of language in the U.S. Code was amended recently to reflect that traffic control devices and this thing called the MUTCD, quote, serve a human-centered purpose, making explicit reference to the safety, inclusion, and mobility of all users. So that is powerful because that's not the MUTC, that is now code that for the last decade or so really didn't reflect and serve human-centered purposes. Purposes were vehicle-related and driver-related. I want to start a little bit here in what's going on in 1899 at the Astoria Hotel in downtown Manhattan. There was a group of men, mostly, who had horseless carriages in 1899. They started a group that ultimately evolved into the American Automobile Association. This group had a leadership role in recognizing at this time that the importance of having uniform criteria across not only New York City as a town, but the nation was going to be important, and planted the seed to what we are dealing with. At the same time, they were having fun with their horseless carriages by creating one of the first races, regionally raced. So they not only were they contemplating standards and regulations, but they started their first race club. They were having fun. This is a patent from a nice gentleman in Battle Creek, Michigan, at the same time in 1899, with the horseless carriage actually having a horse head on to minimize the conflicts with the horses. I thought that was just interesting. No, they just stuck a fake horse on the front. So, interesting note that if there's nothing to do with the MUTCD, but when the Hotel Astoria was torn down in 1930 something, that is when the Empire State Building took it over, and now we have the Empire State Building. So what was going on in Santa Fe in 1890? Of course, the mules and so forth, and the wheelmen here. So as part of the 1899 leadership, we saw the Wheelmen's Club come about, advocating for, ironically, from the bicyclist point of view, even here in Santa Fe, to have better, more consistent paved and designed roads. So there was a strong leadership component from our friends with the bicyclists to compel the federal government, state government, and local governments to actually have standards. So there is in the seed of this MUTCD leadership from the then bicycling community. And I just wanted to point out from the newspaper article, you could order a bicycle for 30 cents in 1899 here in Santa Fe. So in 1914, the first electric traffic signal is installed in Cleveland. And again, here we are looking at a time in our country where the automobile is overtaking pretty much everything, bicyclist movements and horse carriage movements. There's this panicked need for things like traffic control. And I was born in Detroit, so I think it's interesting that in 1920, Detroit had the first colored signal, which is now ubiquitous across this nation. And again, is a component of standards that you see. Not only that, but Detroit has the, whatever you want to call it, the credibility of selling. It is truly derivative of the Motor City. Edward N. Hines, just a real quick note about Edward here. Edward worked for the Wayne County Road Commission in the late, early part of the century, 20th century. Edward came up with the idea of a road stripe that we now see across and is again a ubiquitous part of the MUTCD by observing a carriage, horse carriage carrying milk bottles that were leaking onto a road. So if anything comes away from this presentation today for you that may be of interest, the next time you see a stripe on the road, Edward N. Hines watching a milk. So I fast forward to Woodward Avenue in Detroit. Now, has anybody been to Woodward Avenue in Detroit in this room? No, okay. So I grew up in the greater suburbs of Detroit, and Woodward Avenue here, as a photograph recently, is an example of what an MUTC can deliver, amongst other things. And if you notice here, you're looking at a 12-lane creature of immense magnitude. So when the MUTCD was first beginning in 1935, the reason I brought this up for you all is that Mr. Hines also was the first person to use concrete pavement on this stretch of road in 1911. So when I went here, it's like, oh, what's going on in 2024, having lived there? Is, yep, it's pretty much the same when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s here. Just a colossal mess of road. And I love this mural to your left. If I focus in on it, what I discovered is this is a woman holding a map of the roadway system of Detroit, kind of ironically looking down at this Woodward creature and probably having in her mind, what the? So with that, I want to jump to the MUTC in 1978. 44 years later, bicycle and pedestrian improvements were then included in that edition of the MUTC. So what was going on in 1978, and why did it take 44 years to get to that point? Like what I really helps me understand where we are today with something like this creature called the MUTC is a really understanding of the origins, that it was a consistent document for traffic engineers to apply criteria in a standard operating procedure across the nation. So there was leadership in the 70s that you may be aware of in terms of advocating for bike that were not there necessarily in the 50s, 60s. As a result of that, here we have ped-in bikes in the 78 edition. Now getting into sort of the nuts and bolts of this, the very specific amendments that I think will affect, and I think is important to this group. Number one here is the speed limit. So I have been privy in this room listening to traffic engineers support the MUTCD in the previous editions and the use of the 85th percentile as the governing way of how we set speed limits and other such things related to design speed. This takes a critical look at that criteria and offers alternative options for a city and our city traffic engineers to look at how we set speed limits. This is a big deal, not only for the city of Santa Fe, but across the nation. The addition of bicycle facilities. Now, adding green-colored pavement for bicycle facilities may not be new to you, but it hasn't been up until January of this year, actually allowed. There's been exceptions, and when the city of Santa Fe did in 2015, the pilot projects of what we saw, green facilities, it was basically in violation of the MUTC. And we didn't have permission, we just did it, so good for the city. It adds guidance on bicycle signal faces and other such minutia, but this is, again, important in the trajectory of where we've come from in the last 80 years and where we may be going in the near future. Again, adding additional guidance for bicycle facilities, such as new standards and shared lane markings. And we can go into the details. I don't necessarily want to go into those, but I can assert that by giving our traffic engineers some additional guidance and opportunity, we can be more creative in when it's relating to safety and always stop control. Now, this is really important to me because I have been harping on a particular issue right downtown for years, and that is the signalization that you see right out here on Grant Street near the plaza. The signalizations you see downtown were derived in the 1940s and the 1950s, going back to the ethic of moving vehicles through a space, not people, as quickly and efficiently as possible. In my interpretation, if you anybody, and I think we all do, has the experience of these signals downtown, they're absurd. This is a planner's perception, not a, but if you were to take, and this is what's been happening up now, the MUTCD, which is effectively the Bible of sorts, removing traffic signals is really difficult. If something happens afterwards, and the MUTCD is basically guardrails for keeping those creatures here. This is adding a little bit more opportunity for our traffic engineers, and we will do a study in 2024 to look at whether they're warranted or not. If they are, great. If they're not, I'm hoping the city will do exactly what the now MUTCD will give them leverage to do and get rid of those creatures. Pedestrians. Now, some of you may have noticed, kudos to our new traffic engineer, Mike Damlin, of leading pedestrian intervals and the consideration of other pedestrian facility using signalization and design for intersections. This also gives Mr. Damlin more legitimacy and opportunity to leverage new designs for our intersections for safety. He is doing just that for you and for us. Kudos to him. I like this because that is in my time with the city and the MPO, there has been significant debate on availability of these rectangular rapid flashing beacons and pedestrian. It is a bit of a traffic engineering conundrum up until I think there's this now allowance, a more faithful consideration for actually using these creatures and being supported by the MUTCD. This is relevant to us now as there are both of these options being considered for the new design of Cerrillos Road, and I'm hoping that we'll see more consideration for such things in the future now that this new addition gives us some opportunity. And then there's a new section on the contemplation of autonomous vehicles and how our roads are designed that may or may not accommodate those. I didn't get too much into the weeds with that. It's not going to be on our radar screen, I don't think, in the near future, but it's good to know that it will be on the radar screen in the whatever future. So to keep that in mind. So I had a little, thinking about how important this is in a really, really dry and boring document, but I cannot underscore the importance of what I call unraveling the DNA of how we've got here from the 1930s and 40s in terms of roadway design. What are the basic tenets, whether it's a functional classification and all of the things the MPO even hosts today in terms of functional classification, in terms of travel demand modeling, in terms of the codes and specs that we rely on, have a derivative that goes back to the turn of the 20th century, where things were much different in context. It was that panic mode, we need to build wider, faster, and it in the context of moving drivers and vehicles. So my hope is that we will continue to work together to unravel the DNA of such things and build a better DNA for the future of San. And a good example, which reflecting on Eric's good work with sidewalks and how did we get here to maintaining and having to maintain, well, it goes back to the colonial days when there were compulsory road requirements where gentlemen over the age of 21 or 21 and older were required by colonial law to actually give up 2 days of their month or week to actually work on the roads. That has survived through a test of the 13th Amendment when slavery was abolished. It survived. And then what happened in the, going back to the origins of the MUTCD, in the 1930s and 40s, there was promulgation of zoning standards and regulatory control that then codified it. And we have our maintenance, whatever you want to call it, good, bad, or ugly, that results today. And that even goes back further to our friends in London who established. It's, to me, it's really helpful to understand how we've got here with the MUTC and other such creatures and how we then can maybe make substantive changes in a respectful way to actually save lives for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rani. Member Pilcher.
Question, does the local governments need to specifically adopt this now, or is it just automatically come into use?
Excellent question. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there are states that require the enabling legislation require that the municipalities adopt such things. I had a conversation with Director Wheeler today about just this thing. The answer is no. Now, the NMDOT has adopted the last edition. They go through a routine process of adopting these MUTCs by code. And it will take some time to get this, I would hope, so they adopt them. The city of Santa Fe, in my gleaning, has no record of adoption of the MUTCD, as well as other, there are references, right? So our traffic engineers then will use this as a guiding document because it's been established by the FHWA, but not necessarily codified. We will still look into, is there an advantage or disadvantage for the city to adopt this? I don't really have an answer for that now, but if there is, maybe we should. I don't see one. See that help.
Member Spencer.
Thank you. That was actually a very interesting, and then for something that's supposed to be bone dry, you did a great job. Couple of questions. One is, you mentioned we put in the green pavements in 2015. Presumably that was from the NACTO guidance. What is that? The National Organization of City Transportation. Yeah. And the other thing I was just going to, in terms of the bicycle side, being as old as I am, I started actually commuting about 1978, 79, when that one edition came out. And I think the first thing I read about how to ride a bicycle was John Forrester's Effective Cycling, which at the time was the Bible. And the simple guidance was act like a driver of a vehicle. Of course, that made sense when there was little to no bicycle specific infrastructure, as there wasn't much of the country, and certainly where I grew up in the country east of Buffalo. But as bicycling infrastructure started to come into play, that turned into a war between John Forrester effective cycling advocates and what we used to call the paint and path people. I think we've sort of come around to not situate, not saying you have to take sides, but to use both effective cycling and bicycle and pedestrian specific infrastructure to make bicycling safer for everybody while still trying to keep some commonalities in how we all interact so that we're not doing things which are completely at odds with each other. So not only the MUTCD has evolved, but I think the bicycle planning and bicycle guidance by the major organizations, including the League of American Bicyclists, has evolved as well.
Mr. Chair, members, it's interesting to note that the law provides a compulsory review process and update every 4 years. So this community ought not wait 40 years for another advancement before we do some good work. So that's going to take a lot of work to update this creature that's over 1,000 pages every 4 years. But the intent is a recognition that things in terms of technology, safety are changing so dramatically right now in a good way that the law ought to reflect, and the MUTCD. So I'll be back in 4 years to do a presentation about how cool the MUTCD is.
You mentioned that the current version gives traffic engineers more leeway in setting speed limits. Is there more of a Vision Zero approach in there in terms of, okay, how fast can you go before you destroy a pedestrian crossing the street?
That's way too aspirational, but no, but it does give that specific guidance that recognizes two things. The first one is just that, and a really interesting story about FHWA in terms of how they've stepped back. How saying, you know, it really was just a suggestion. It wasn't in law. It was the MUTC. And so here's what happened since 1935 and to today is that most of our technocrats use this in a municipal or county or local jurisdiction way. It is the Bible. And that is for many good reasons. Now FHWA is saying, hey, look, we never really intended to do that. But the reality is we do. We use this as a governing document for how we design our streets in many ways. So there's irony in the FHWA saying, no, we didn't really mean that. And it's basically your fault if you take it too seriously. So that will be a continuing discussion point as the MUTCD evolves in the next several years, is how compulsory is it and how effective is it going to be to the new directive for addressing people, not just driving. Past it, I think, at least from the feds down, hey, we're really dealing with movement of people. Another one of our interesting story about this is that for several years, this community, as well as others being an arts community, has been looking at how do we paint crosswalks in a creative way that will be fun and really engaging and also safe. The then version of the MUTC said, no, you can't do that because the crosswalks need to do this. And the contemplation was that if you're going to have a rainbow or whatever on the ground, that we don't trust the pedestrian, that they won't be just looking at the artwork and get killed. So therefore we can't do it. This new version said, well, that was kind of a ridiculous analysis and we will allow it. So thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Okay, thank you, Mr. Ani. Really appreciate the presentation.
Cool, thanks.
Anybody?
And I used to be cool, just by the way. I used to.
You still are cool, Eric. All right, let's go to move on to the last item, which is BPAC Staff Liaison Report. Ms. Glorioso, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So the roadways and trails is managing 26 projects this year, of which 6 are for construction. So the Guadalupe Street is ongoing. We started Cañada Rincon this month. And by the way, Cañada Rincon project originated from BPAC in 2011, BTAC in 2011. We just starting construction, but that is, and then this next week, we will start construction of the El Camino Real Academy Trail, which will connect the Cottonwood mobile home to the school. And it's a safe route to school project funded by the federal government 100%. Then the Agua Fria South Meadows intersection improvement is still ongoing. We started construction in August. And then I will bid out 2 projects for construction in the spring. And that's the Agua Fria Cottonwood Roundabout project, and that the extension of Tierra Contenta Trail from Buffalo Grass to South Meadows. With these 26 projects, there will be 3 new projects. One is the reconstruction of Governor Miles Road. That's funded by the legislative capital outlay funding. And the Henry Lynch Roundabout is, this is actually under the jurisdiction of the county. But we cannot reconstruct the Henry Lynch Road if the roundabout is not designed, because the reconstruction of Henry Lynch Road accommodates the roundabout at the intersection of Henry Lynch and Agua Fria. And that project is in the Santa Fe Metropolitan Transportation Plan for so many years. And then Phase B of Tierra Contenta. So the design projects, so many design projects at different phases. During design review meetings, I think we are the most transparent so far, because if you can see in your packet, the result of review meetings are in your packet. While with review designs, it's a teamwork, and the decision is usually based on compromise. The critique of Mr. Rogers about Bishop's Lodge Road, that project's now costing us $30 million at 60% design. But the trail came from BTAC. It's a BTAC project. And so when we started this project, it was, we were going to do the trail, but the president of the HOA came to BPAC and requested to do something on the road itself. The trail was highly supported at 2 public meetings. There's a purpose why you encourage the participation of your community members, because they are the ones living there. And if the request is coming from the community to build this multi-use path, then we need to consider it. We are negotiating with the division director of parks of what to do with street landscaping, and it's ongoing. That project at the end may be worth $40 million, and we are planning to apply for funding from federal government. That's at 60% design. We are expecting the 90% design in 3 months, and then we can apply for funding. I am applying for 2 projects that identified by BPAC in your strategic plan. The first one is the extension of Arroyo Chamiso's trail to connect the East Zia to West Zia. And that will happen tomorrow. The SFMPO set up that funding meeting tomorrow. We the underpass project, I explained why suddenly it's $15.5 million at 50% design. But the result of our meeting with HSIP 2 weeks ago is that HSIP, that's Highway Safety Improvement Program, is committing $8 million to construction. I will apply for $2 million from CMAC, another federal funding program that is carbon mitigation air quality program. They have, I will apply for the rail trail, the improvements on rail trail for $2 million. And Chair and Councilor Michael Garcia and Councilor Romero Worth has prioritized this project under for legislative funding. And we were requesting $4 million for this project. And as soon as I can't remember when is the deadline for SS4A funding, but I will apply for this project as well. I'm anticipating that this project will cost like $20 million at 100% design plan. But the Public Works Department Director is committed to construct this project, and any funding gap, she said she will request GRT funding. So this project will be constructed. Paseo del Sol, we heard Mr. Young reported that Bike Santa Fe wants to see a protected bike lane on Paseo del Sol. And if you see the packet, there is a review design for Paseo del Sol, and the commitment that the Public Works Department Director made is to provide buffered bike lanes, not protected bike lanes, because at this moment, it's so difficult to maintain bike lanes, period. So if you make protected bike lanes, they said that maintenance is more difficult. So the commitment is to construct buffered bike lanes. And Paseo del Sol has buffered bike lanes, and Lynch has buffered bike lanes. And so that's the direction we're taking. Pacheco Street, we will receive funding for the bicycle and pedestrian improvements on Pacheco Street next cycle. We were receiving it because Councilor Garcia and Councilor Romero Worth prioritize it for Council District 2 projects. And we will receive the funding, I think, next year. But we will reconstruct Pacheco Street. I think that's my report. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Glorioso Monts. Any questions or comments from committee members? Member Spencer.
Not to be the perpetual pessimist, but is there a plan B for the St. Michael's Crossing if for some reason some of that funding falls apart?
I think I'm forever optimistic. Like, for example, last year our funding was $41 million. The challenges that we are facing this year and maybe in this coming 2 years is to fund mega projects. Because like, for example, Guadalupe Street was, the funding for construction is started at 1 million, then became 3 million. And I just went back and went back to EDSIP. And finally, we got $10 million from EDSIP. Plus the design, it was $11 million. And then we see it's getting constructed. So I think it's also how you strategize the funding requirement of a project and the opportunities. There's so many funding sources, the infrastructure bill, the SS4A, the raise. But the challenge is to put together a very strong proposal to the government. And another challenge is to meet the local match requirement, because for federal funding, like they can fund a project up to $30 million like RAISE, there is no limit. If you can request $30 million for construction of Bishop's Lodge Road, the challenge is to meet the local match, because the local match of RAISE and SS4A is 20%. So 20% of $30 million, that's how, and my department director said that we will raise the local match through GRT.
Member Spencer, just to follow up on the St. Michael's underpass, I think, yes, there will be a plan, not only Plan B, but Plan C and probably Plan D. I appreciate Romella's optimism, but we want to make sure that for some reason, if we need to take another route, we do that. I think the end goal is to ensure that this project gets completed. And so whether it's unexpected GRT, bond money, going to the federal government, I mean, I think nothing's off the table at this moment. I think and with, somebody like Romella ensuring that it continues to move forward. Thank you.
That's great. I was just wondering if there was an engineering way to maybe do a diversion or a slight detour to get farther away from the tracks so that you wouldn't have to do quite so much engineering, if that would bring the cost down, even if it added a few hundred yards. But let's burn that bridge when we come to it.
Right of way is too narrow.
Okay.
You can.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Romella. Really appreciate the update. Okay, next on the agenda, sorry. We've got subcommittee communications. We've got first up, policy planning and law. Member Eisenstein.
Thank you, Chair. I do not have an update right now. The one project that we will be looking at with Romella is the strategic plan and how we need to update that for the coming year. So stay tuned.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, hearing none. Next up is item B, promotion, education, and programming. Member Gabriel.
No update.
Okay. We removed item C, so we are now on to matters from staff. Ms. Gloriosa Mas.
Congratulations to the committee. We got the silver level. And now we need to celebrate that. It's a huge project. I appreciate everyone's help. The application is massive. There were 100 plus questions. And then Chair Garcia is thinking that we may have a separate awarding ceremony for during one of the governing body meeting. I'm just waiting for our award, for our certificate to come, to arrive, and maybe we can have a awarding ceremony. And then for the bike month, I was thinking that we have some funding. Maybe we can buy some bicycle-friendly signage because they are selling it, and we can put in a strategic, locations that we are bike-friendly community. I think that's a huge thing to celebrate. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Member Spencer.
I really want to thank Romella and her staff, the city staff, the MPO, everybody who contributed to that. We looked at that application. It was like, oh my God. It was a heavy lift, and we really appreciate all the work that you folks did.
Member Gabriel.
I don't know if you were alluding to this, Romella, but perhaps we could do a celebration with the governing body during Bike Month.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best timing for it, just because I will be, unfortunately, for the March governing body meetings, I will be out of state. And so I think if we pushed it out to April, might as well push it out a couple more weeks and celebrate Bike Month, celebrate the achievements of y'all working to get us that status. And so, and it gives us enough time to work with the city clerk for a presentation, because we do ultimately need to get on their agenda, which sometimes it's not easy. Any other matters from staff? Okay, matters from the committee. Member Bo.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to report out that I was, a couple of meetings ago, I was asked to serve on the Santa Fe County Transportation Safety Subcommittee of the Transportation Advisory Committee. And I attended that meeting. Unfortunately, I attended remotely and they weren't really geared for it, so didn't have the materials, but I got them subsequently. And there were a few presentations that I thought would be appropriate. I could send them out to Romella and she could one-way blast them to you all. A couple, one was a video of a project that's hoped for in Madrid, to build a boardwalk between the ballpark and downtown to get the pedestrians off of Highway 14. And the other is a building off the Section 3H3 of the new MUTCD. There's a project that someone is looking for funding for to paint kind of alarming crosswalks. No, they're they're interesting designed crosswalks in Santa Fe. They're kind of they look really trippy. But what they, I think it's Bloomberg or some foundation is doing these nationwide, and they are kind of somewhat maybe distracting, but they are something that notifies the drivers as they're blowing through Madrid that something different is going on here. So I'll send that presentation to Romella and ask her to send it out to y'all. And it's just an interesting project. And that's pretty much it. Thanks.
Member Bo, any other members? Okay, hearing none. Next up is matters from the chair. Just again, kudos to everybody for everything that you all have accomplished, whether it's the resolution or the reauthorization of the silver status. Just goes to show the hard work and dedication of you all, the committee members. So just thank you for everything that you do, and continue to pushing the needle forward for Santa Fe. With that being said, our next meeting is March 14th. I will not be here that day, so Member Spencer, if you're able to meet, you will take the reign of chair. I will be somewhere flying back from DC that day, hopefully closer to home versus stuck in an airport somewhere. But unfortunately, I won't be able to be with y'all next month. With that, we are adjourned. Have a good evening, everybody.